Let's talk about what's unfolding in Ukraine. Big updates overnight from the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, and the Western media propaganda piece on all of this. Now, as the Russian army closes in on the city of Severodonetsk, there is a big pile of propaganda being shoved at us from the Western media. Now, we're going to get into the ridiculous Wall Street Journal stories in just a moment. So this is Severodonetsk. It's the Russian army grinding its way to the center of one of the most important cities right now in the Donbass region. And they're dealing with the same shit that they dealt with in Mariupol, which is Ukrainian soldiers hiding or hunkering down in apartment buildings. Now, these apartment buildings aren't empty. They have people that live there. So just like in Mariupol, Russia has to go slowly and methodically to sort out the soldiers from the civilians in this area. Not good. Now, we've heard Western media propaganda saying, hey, see, Russia isn't as big and bad as we thought they were because they're going so slowly. Why are they going so slow? They're an old Soviet army. Well, it turns out, despite Western propaganda, the Russians don't actually want to hurt civilians. And the Azov battalion knows that, so that's why there has not been a blitzkrieg. Now, if you study...
What do you mean by blitzkrieg?
So a blitzkrieg, of course...
Not the Ramones song.
Not the Ramones song, but it is, Germans, of course, famously using a blitzkrieg strategy, sort of like overwhelming force. We're going to take our Panzer division and we're going to shove it right up your ass. And we're going to do it so fast that you won't
don't want that.
You won't even have... If you have a Panzer comes for your ass, you will not have any time to do anything because it's going to be so fast, it's going to be a blitzkrieg. I don't know. It's the speed it's the speed with which you move, and so it's sort of like shock and awe.
Yeah.
Right. United States has done shock and awe when we did that in Iraq and so forth. So
yes, and this is not anything that anymore is controversial, although it was in the early days of this conflict controversial to say these things on certain platforms, but it's not anymore. Now the Wall Street Journal is showing clearly that these units inside of the Ukrainian army are sort of going into civilian areas, right? And the
Washington Post also.
Right. So this is front page news now. So this is not anyone can say
disinformation.
Anything, right? Yeah. This is okay. So I just wanted to, because you know how we have to be on this platform.
Yeah. Well, no, and by the way, it was proven demonstrably during the Mariupol takeover. So we know that. So now, if you study Russian military history, they don't use the blitzkrieg method. That's just not what Russians do. They don't follow sort of the German blitzkrieg style, right? Well, next we learned today that the United States has already been helping to attack Russia, not only with supplying weapons, but also by waging cyber warfare. Take a look at this, front page. U.S. has been supporting Ukraine with offensive cyber operations, a top general reveals. U.S. Army General Paul Nakasone told British media outlet Sky News that we've conducted a series of operations across the full spectrum, offensive, defensive, information operations. He did not specify the target specifically of these operations, but he said, you usually do these things when you're actually at war with a country. Further evidence that the United States is at war with Russia. Like if you were wondering at home at all whether or not we were at war with them, but we are. Now, meanwhile, we have CIA analyst Larry Johnson has been cataloging all of the Ukrainian units that have been quitting their jobs and rebelling against their commanders. Now, the number has now doubled in a week, now up to 12 units quitting, saying we're done. And these are just a few examples. The video you're seeing here is just examples of some of these soldiers filming themselves and saying, hey, we're done. We don't have the supplies. We want to go home and spend time with our family because we've been basically sold a bill of goods.
Well, also remember, a lot of them were forced to stay and fight. Men of fighting age could not leave when this began. It was, you're staying here, you're defending this country whether you like it or not.
Right.
So many of them may not have been ideologically aligned with the conflict to begin with.
So take a look at this list. This is now up to 12. This is 12 units that have now just basically thrown in the towel. You've got, this is crazy, right? 13th Battalion of the 58th Motorized Infantry Brigade, the 2nd Company, 3rd Platoon, 115th Brigade, 3rd Platoon of the 115th Brigade. On and on and on the list goes, right? Again, it was 6 last week. It's now doubled. And Larry's been doing a great job cataloging all of this. This is the 30th Mechanized Brigade, 3rd Battalion. Listen to how they describe why they're quitting. Watch.
9 рота. Просимо вас прийняти певні міри. Ми відступили зі своїх бойових позицій в зв'язку з тим, що в нас не було на місці керівництва. Нас привезли непідготовлених людей, які взагалі не мають військового досвіду на позиції. Сказали лише одне.
Note to self, anytime you surrender,
Okay.
put a windscreen on your microphone.
All right. I surrender every day.
30th Mechanized.
Just-
You'd think the 30th Mechanized would have a windscreen for the microphone.
Yeah.
They don't.
But again, to this point, right? They're like, we're not people who are military trained. And so, you know, our families sort of got themselves to safety. We, us men, could not. Well, we didn't sign up for this, right? And so I think that this is another example about how human borders are just such bullshit. And we're asking people to die for something that they may not even really want to. Like, we're humans. We just want to protect our families and live our lives, not fight for someone else's cause.
Well, we're not even trained and we're in charge of the mechanized division. Okay. Like, that sounds technical.
Yes.
Right. Here's another one. Here's the 18th Marine Battalion of the 35th Brigade. Listen to their surrender video.
Доброго дня, шановне панство. Ми окремий 18-й батальйон морської піхоти в складі 35-ї бригади. Звертаємося до суспільства за допомогою. Просимо вас вплинути на вище керівництво батальйону бригади.
Yeah, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. That's just another example. That's another example. Here now is the Ukrainian 14th Brigade, 6th Battalion. These are three that I'm going to show you. And they just, you know, again, there's no subtitles on this one, but they're just saying they're basically the same thing. So surrender after surrender. I don't see surrender throwing in the towel, and if they get captured, they get captured. But they're quitting. They're quitting. So all of this would, of course, lead to a huge increase in Western propaganda, as you can imagine, right? Americans and Europeans are suffering at home, so we need some good fake news to get you excited about paying higher gas prices while we spend $40 billion sending weapons to a military that is collapsing before our eyes. And boy, oh boy, the Western press did not disappoint with their propaganda over the past 24 hours. Did you see this? Two amazing pieces of journalism from the Wall Street Journal that I want to highlight right now. The first made me laugh out loud when I saw it. This headline. And then I want to discuss the story with a few. Then I discussed this story with a few sources who also called total bullshit on this story. So this is the Wall Street Journal. Here's the headline. Documents reveal hundreds of Russian troops broke ranks over Ukraine orders. Okay. So instead of covering actual documented quitting of Ukrainian army, which we just showed you here on the show, the Wall Street Journal didn't cover that. And they run a hilarious story based on documents.
Well,
Now,
I wouldn't say hilarious. That's the
well, I
wrong
mean,
word.
hilarious in the scale of the propaganda. I mean, to me, it's when you start to unpack this and you realize the group that they cite in the article literally is tied to George Soros funded. And you
Yes.
realize when you
It's
start.
very disingenuous, and it's disappointing because you know, the coverage of this conflict has started to show that that there is strength in I don't know how to say this, so you go ahead.
Okay, good. Well, when it comes to you,
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid. One intelligence source we spoke to today says this has all the signs of a classic British MI6 fake documents story. Also, just think about this for a moment. The Wall Street Journal reporter has Russian documents that show troops were quitting. Okay, show us the documents, print them up. We'd love to see them, right? WikiLeaks is good at doing that. You show us. Better than that, why don't you show us some videos or photos of these soldiers who actually deserted? Instead, they print one photo of one soldier. Even better, the group cited in the article, as I just mentioned, George Soros-funded organization. So again, all of this tied together. There are also many, many more problems with this piece that I don't have time to go into today, but okay, I want you to go read it for yourself. Okay, you read it for yourself and make your own decisions. Now, just like the Associated Press did a few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal also, in a separate article today, did a ride-along with Ukrainian security forces. You know how like local news stations will like do ride-alongs with police departments?
They embed. Is the lingo.
Yeah, they embed with the police, you know, like cops, you know. Well, the Wall Street Journal did a ride-along with the Ukrainian security forces. You remember these guys. In an article called Ukraine Security Services Hunt for Russia Supporters and Agents Hide in Their Midst. The article is really disgusting.
It's actually very disappointing and disingenuous because if you have been in that region at all, you understand that there is a lot of disagreement on what is the right way to be. There are a lot of people who do not like Western forces. There are a lot of people who do not like NATO involvement. And so in this article, the Ukrainian forces go into some dude's house and they look at his tablet and they're like, you've been posting pro-Russian things. You know, they're bombing us. And so you support them, you think this. And so they are literally attacking this person who is doing nothing, right, except ideologically aligned with Russia, which we have reported here. There are many people in Ukraine who just said, I'm going to wait this out. I'm not actually so sure what is better for this region. So I'm going to see, right? And so these forces go into in the article, they go in some guy's house, they knock it down and say, oh, look at your tablet. You've been, pro-Russia. That's not allowed. And so the ideology, which is popular in that region of the world, and we saw for ourselves just going to Serbia a few weeks ago, which was very shocking to those of us in the West who feel like we're told everybody hates Putin. That's just not true. There are a lot of people who hold dear to these ideologies. And this is just bullying someone for having that opinion.
Well, you remember the Associated Press piece a few weeks ago, right? The Associated Press piece had, they did a ride along.
Yeah.
And, we know the history of the SBU, and we know how brutal they've been, right?
Yeah.
And so the SBU has had a long history of human rights violations. I mean, because remember, the U.S. State Department labeled the SBU violators of human rights. Take a look at the website. This is the State Department of the United States website. Okay. This is on their website right now. You can go there right now if you want. I encourage you not to because you're watching this show, but read it later. You can read it for yourself. This is the 2021 report. So last year on the SBU. And these go back many years. You can read them for many, many years.
Right.
You can go back, right? So, and they say significant, look at this, highlighting significant security, unlawful arbitrary killings, including extrajudicial killings of the government or its agents, all cases of cruel and inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment of people. We've highlighted this before on the show, but it's the last time I showed it to you, I had a website version of it from 2017. This is last year.
Yes. So
then I as I'm going through this Wall Street Journal article, I cannot find not one mention
of SBU as a undesirable.
Yeah, nothing from the State Department. It would be nice to know, right? Wouldn't it be nice to know, like if the Wall Street Journal is writing an article about the SBU and they're doing a ride along, that they would mention this is the same group that the United States actually says are violators of human rights, but there's no mention of it in the Wall Street Journal article.
Right.
I mean, here's how.
But they go right along and violate someone's rights to be in his house and think things about Putin.
This is what you were saying. So here is the article, and here is this guy. They're like hanging out at his house. They slam his door open. Right, here's the article, and I'm going to kind of just go through the text here. By the way, so the Wall Street Journal sends a photographer, so they're taking photos as they bust into people's houses, and it says, "Open up, SBU is here." Look, I'm going to read along in the text here. Bellowed the lead officer, clad in body armor with his face covered by a balaclava. "Open up, SBU is working here," he said, adding a couple of expletives. As the door lock unturned, the squad rushed in. On the floor now," the commander shouted at Mr. Popov, who's 59 years old. "All clear," yelled another one. "You are a Soviet man, right? You must believe the Soviet Union stood for peace, right?" An investigator asks Mr. Popov, who's laying sprawled on the carpet. "Yes," he replied. "So why are you supporting those people who are shelling our city?" I love this propaganda. We've got the Wall Street Journal here with us, so we're going to go on a little ride along. These are the things that we're going to yell out so you can put this in your article, okay? So wait a minute, and it's all propaganda.
I mean, what is a reporter supposed to do with this? And then they write up the story as, "You sure showed that guy."
Yeah, wow,
old dude with his tablet in his living room.
You really threw that guy on the ground, that 59-year-old Mr. Popov. Way to go. In the city of Kharkiv.
Liking his heritage.
Yeah, exactly. Of Russian descent, has a family from Russia, is an ethnic Russian, and he's supporting Vladimir Putin. Like, no mention of this, or no. I mean, it's unbelievable, this level of like coziness that the Wall Street Journal and the Associated Press have with the Ukrainian security services.
Yeah, this is. I mean, I don't know. I'm reading this today, and I'm like, what do they want us to take away from this?
Well, they want us to take away that, again, Russia bad. Even though Ukraine is getting their asses handed to them, we need to support sending additional $700 million in weapons, and you need to we need to keep them in the fight.
But this article seems to me like they are actually framing the SBU as bullies, because, I'm reading this almost like a fiction narrative. I'm like, who are we rooting for here? Because this was just a guy
if they were framing it as they were being bullies, there would be mention that the United States government actually labels them as violators of human rights.
Yeah.
And that we should never send money to these people. This is another thing that Congress has written into laws, that we are not sending money to violators of human rights. And yet we do.
Yeah.
So there's no mention of this in the Wall Street Journal. So you won't be shocked to learn that the Wall Street Journal failed to mention that. They didn't have any mention of the human rights, angle in this story at all. And then there's another big piece of news that came out today on food shortages. We need to talk about these food shortages story, which has also been played we've all been played like a fiddle when it comes to the propaganda. To hear the United States explain it, of course, Vladimir Putin is in control of the food supplies, and the United States doesn't have any food. That's how we're supposed to play it, right? Here's a CNN article that frames it this way. Biden blames Russia's war in Ukraine for food supply shortages and price hikes. We've heard about Putin's price hike. I also love that they show
an emaciated cow.
An emaciated cow.
This is like a biblical image from the 7 years famine.
I mean, of all the images, we got an emaciated cow. That's a Putin cow. Apparently,
Putin did that to that cow.
Putin did, yeah. Putin.
Speaking
Putin's
of food
cow.
shortages, in the chat, they're saying that my shirt just makes them want me to eat chips and salsa.
Right.
So sorry about
Frida Kahlo. I know. I literally want.
I mean, I
keep bring some more salsa to the table, please, because
that's a rude comment.
I keep expecting you to like to be on a velvet painting. Just like that's just for some reason that's I'm pretty sure my grandmother had a velvet painting of you in her house wearing that shirt.
It's too bad I tweezed my brows today.
I know, Frida Kahlo. You should have definitely brought some chips and salsa. If you wear that shirt next time, you need to bring tacos.
Okay, I'm sorry. Back to the food shortages.
Yeah, so we're talking about food shortages, and we're talking about food. So now you're making me hungry. Anyway, the Western narrative, of course, is that this is all Putin's fault, right? And in fact, if you go right now to the U.S. Embassy's website, this is hilarious graphic. Look at this. This is on the U.S. Embassy's website. War, not sanctions, causes food insecurity. And just look at a couple of the things that are on this list. This is hilarious. My favorite on this graphic is that they blame Putin for bombing empty fields. Do you see that on there? Mm-hmm. The reason that you have food shortages is because Putin is bombing fields, which is hilarious. That's a good use of weapons, right? $1 million weapons is to bomb empty fields to blow up a few grains of wheat.
Okay.
That's ridiculous. But now the Russians are saying, we have your grain. So in an interview yesterday, Sergei Lavrov of Russia says, look, we actually have your grain and we are ready to deliver it. However, port operators are under sanction. While grain itself is exempted, the ports are refusing to work with us because of your sanctions, and they're blocking the grain.
This is like one of those left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing kind of thing. That
it makes sense.
People will starve because of it.
And here's what Sergei Lavrov has to say. Here's a quote. I'm quoting him now. And he told journalists last night, although Western countries keep saying that grain has not been sanctioned, they for some reason fail to mention that the ships that transport Russian grain are in fact under sanctions. European ports do not allow them in. There's no insurance available. And in general, Western sanctions have disrupted the logistical and financial infrastructure that Russia uses to export its own grain, Lavrov told journalists in Moscow. Now, again, that's Sergei Lavrov. He's Russian. You do with it what you want. Well, we report, you decide. We're giving you the information on this story. But I think the Western propaganda
and the information
is strong.
remains that despite all of the sanctions on the United States' own State Department did show that fuel and agricultural products and food were exempted from sanctions up until now, right? And so there is no evidence that those sanctions would have affected our economy if those things were exempted. That it just does not track. So maybe we're doing things now to make that the case, but up until now, that should not have been the case.
Right.
That explanation doesn't track if you pay close enough attention to what they're actually writing down on paper versus saying from a press platform.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, this whole Putin price hike thing from the beginning hasn't made any sense.
So the more we pay attention, the more we can call that out. But the problem is most people be like, oh, okay. Well, there's a war on. And, I think people sort of think, well, we have to adopt this World War II type mentality and we'll ration some sugar and things like that. That's sort of what war is about.
And they're all liars. They are all liars.
You sit on a throne of lies.
That's right, Elf. You do. That's what Western media does. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.